The conscious self is real. We see that it's necessary to have something which coordinates the actions of the conscious faculties of perception, of the mind, to coordinate our activities. David Hume is famous for refuting, or trying to refute, Descartes' idea that the self is real. Descartes wanted to say that the self is real and you can't deny its existence. Hume said, I don't accept this because whenever I try to find the self, all I find is a perception. Therefore, I don't accept that there is a self. But we can say, but who's that I that's looking for the self, that only finds the perception? That I is the conscious self, as we're defining it. So you can't get outside the I because it comes up even in its own denial. The coming into being of the physical body. This was the big stumbling block for materialists. They were trying to see some way that they could explain where living forms come from, because everyone can see that living forms don't come together just by physical interaction. Newton, for example, Sir Isaac Newton said that was the eye designed without any knowledge of optics? Was the ear designed without any knowledge of sound? So then he said it's obvious that there is an incorporeal, subtle, omnipresent, all-powerful being which has created these things. This is Sir Isaac Newton. Even modern biologists, atheists, like Sir Francis Crick, for example, he said that living systems look as though they were designed rather than evolved. And Richard Dawkins made the same. Now these are two of the most famous atheists. Even they say that it looks as though they were designed, although of course they don't accept this. So it's self-evident. So the question is it possible to state a consistent theory? And the answer is, no, it's not. First thing is chemical evolution. Before you can get to living beings, you have to get some, the basic building blocks, cells. So without going into details, there's one science writer in the New York Times in 2000, he said, everything about the origin of life on Earth is a mystery. And it seems the more that is known, the more acute the puzzle gets. That's a very bad sign. If you're reducing ignorance with your knowledge, that's a good sign. If you're increasing ignorance with your knowledge, that's a very bad sign. It means you're going in the wrong direction. Francis Crick, he said, an honest man armed with all the knowledge available to us now could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. That's another way of saying it looks as though there's inconceivable potency building living matter. And Lauren Isley, who's a prominent evolutionist, he said, after chiding the theologian for his reliance on myth and miracle, science found itself in the unenviable position of having to create a mythology of its own, namely the assumption that what, after long effort, could not be proved to take place today, had in fact taken place in the primeval past. In other words, they haven't been able to see life coming from matter here, but they have to say that it happened in the past. And he's saying this is a myth. Then, molecules to cells. So scientists themselves accept that cells are fantastically complicated machines. And machines are produced by high technology. So Professor Ambrose, who's emeritus professor at the University of London, he said, so the beautiful fine-tuning of the chlorophyll molecule recalls us the anthropic principle already seen in the fine-tuning of the emerging cosmos. In other words, he's saying there's a designer there. Now, when we come to biological evolution, of course, this is accepted practically universally in the scientific community. And literally, if you don't accept evolution, you're considered to be mad. Either mad or like a flat earth fanatic. But evolution, the idea of evolution directly contradicts our direct experience. And Darwin, when he put forward the theory, he admitted that. But he thought that the successive breeders could be extended indefinitely by nature over a long period of time. Well, it can't. We found that out. Species do not change. Any amount of breeding doesn't change species. It produces varieties which are less fit for survival and which go back to the original type. They don't produce new species. Mutation also produces less healthy, fit individuals. It doesn't produce new forms. It doesn't produce new features. It doesn't produce new species. So evolution is a non-starter. The evolutionists say, no, that's okay, but we look at the fossil record because we see that things change over a period of time in the fossil record. It's true that they change, but it's not true that you see species changing. Evolutionists themselves admit that what you see is new species coming into the fossil record, and they remain unchanged for some time, and then other new species come in. Not only there's no intermediates, but you'll see whole families and classes of living entities all coming in fully developed without any history at all. Especially there's what's called the Cambrian explosion that took place maybe about 450 million years ago. So in this Cambridge explosion, according to the paleontologists, within 5 or 10 million years from in the previous strata, there's just things like jellyfish, very, very small traces of soft-bodied animals. And then suddenly there's a huge variety, many, many different kinds of animals. And the families are already developed when they appear. No evolutionary history. So the evolutionists themselves say, it looks like, of course we don't accept it, but it looks like divine creation. So again, it's a self-evident fact that they deny, but they can't come up with a consistent alternative. There's no mechanism for evolution. Now they talk about mutation, but mutation doesn't produce new forms. It produces less fit individuals. And we see that actually all species are mutating. There's genetic mutations taking place all the time. But there's many fossil species that have remained for 30 million years, 50 million years, 100 million years, 200 million years and more, but they haven't changed. But mutation is going on all the time. So this is another myth. The myth of genetic mutation. When we come to the idea that human beings have evolved from apes, first of all we have to say that there's no single example from single-celled animals through invertebrates, vertebrates, fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, apes and human beings. There's not one intermediate link. Not one. And as far as the so-called evolution from apes to human beings, then you're faced with a puzzle that how come human beings suddenly appeared with so many special human features? Speech, the opposed thumb, like this. Marcel Schutzenberger, of Paris, he said, the reality is that we're confronted with total conceptual bankruptcy. Actually, there is no fossil family tree. Henry Guy, the editor of Nature, he said that the evolutionary schemes, they're a completely human invention, created after the fact and shaped to accord with human prejudices. And he said they carry no more validity than a bedtime story. So, added to that, Michael Cremo and Richard Thompson, they did exhaustive research showing that there's been consistent, systematic suppression of evidence for human beings older than, say, about 500,000 years. There are some remains that slipped under the bar. For example, there's human footprints at 3.7 million years old. And there was a skull which was admitted 800,000 years old. But in general, they don't accept older remains. But there are many, many examples in Italy, in Spain, many in America also. 30 million years, 40 million years, 50 million years, 100 million years. Many examples, but they're not admitted in the present kind of body of knowledge. They're just put to one side. And if anyone tries to emphasize it, they're out of the establishment. They can't publish, they're given the sack, they've got no job, they can't publish. So in this way, the scientific establishment maintains the status quo, maintains its present view of where human beings came from.